morning and welcome to the Washington State Department of Agriculture's virtual press conference. My name is Carla Salp. I am the Public Engagement Specialist with WSDA and am an agency spokesperson for the Asian Giant Hornet Project. This morning we will be hearing from Sven Spieschiger with an update about some pretty exciting activities with Asian Giant Hornet that we've had over the past couple of weeks. In addition to Sven, we also have Anne LeBrun from USDA Aphis, Jake Bodart from the Oregon Department of Agriculture, and Paul Van Westendorp from the BC Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries available to take questions from the press. I actually haven't seen Paul yet, but I'm sure he'll be logging in. We would also like to ask your help again to continue spreading the message to the public to encourage them to report every Asian Giant Hornet that they see every time they see one, especially over the upcoming next few weeks, because there definitely could be more nests out there. The best way to report again is using our online reporting form on our Hornets page at agr.wa.gov/hornets. Next best is to email us at hornets@agr.wa.gov. And finally, we have a hotline that can accept reports at 1-800-443-6684. We also have some additional photos and videos that were not in our press release that we sent out. You can get them from our Box account, which there are links to download those photos and videos on the press release that went out earlier this morning. It's also on our online version of the press release as well. The families involved in the initial report of the Asian Giant Hornet and the nest eradication have asked that the press not contact them. Also, while we will be providing dead specimens to museums and researchers, we will not be distributing them for private collections. One last reminder to please keep your line muted to ensure the best sound quality for everyone, and please don't use your video unless you are actually speaking. Sven, please go ahead.
All right, can you hear me okay, Carla?
Loud and clear.
Great. All right, well, good morning and thank you everyone for attending our press conference here. So we have had a couple of very exciting weeks, and it all starts as it usually does with help from the public. And on August 11th, the landowner took the time to send in a report that we could immediately confirm from a photograph was in fact Asian Giant Hornets. And this was a photograph of hornets attacking paper wasp nests on their property. We were able to visit the property owner later that day and actually net a live hornet. And because of this, we were able to get up there, get a second hornet by August 12th, and actually attack two of our tracking tags to them. We learned quite a bit in the first week there, and some things that we had not learned before. One of them was that they were very strongly preying on paper wasp nests in the eaves of houses and other structures. And though we had noted this from the previous year, and this is what prompted the discovery of the nest last year as well, this behavior was extremely prevalent. And there were some other things that were going on with that, where we noticed them raiding paper wasp nests that were actually protected from view. And that's telling us that they are definitely keying in on something other than a visual cue. And so we'll be working with our Aphis counterparts to explore that to make our trap attractants better. And so we're pretty excited to learn that. We also had a report from a homeowner in the area that was not the original reportee, that later in the evening of the 12th, the Hornets did a mass attack of one of the paper wasp nests, which is the classic slaughter phase behavior that is described in some of the literature. And this is pretty early in the year for that kind of activity. So that's something we learned that was pretty interesting. We were not able to get video of this, but apparently a number of hornets came and attacked one of the paper wasp nests, and the landowner was able to share this story with us. And One of the other things that happened is a little later on, right after the nest was actually detected, was another property owner called in, and basically with a report that was backed up by photo evidence. So she was definitely seeing Asian giant hornet, and she had reported that she observed them actually attacking and carrying off single honeybees that were foraging on her sunflowers. And so we were able to gather all of this information with a lot of help from the public, and we continue to appreciate that, and we continue to encourage these reports. So the tracking event was as difficult as one might think when you're trying to follow something that flies very quickly through Himalayan blackberry. We were able to affix 2 tags. One of the hornets was able to slough the tag off, so she didn't chew it off. We have switched to Kevlar thread this year, and just the knot wasn't quite tight enough, and she was able to do this. But our tracking crew was able to actually recover this tag and deactivate it, and we were able to basically tie that onto another hornet later in the week, which was pretty exciting because this is the one that actually led us back to the nest. The second tag we have not recovered yet, and there were some indications, since we were very close to the Canadian border, that we lost the signal as we were pointing north into Canada. For this reason, we worked with our counterparts in British Columbia, and they were able to basically get the radio tag frequency from us and do some tracking on the Canadian side of the border. And that second one was unfortunately never recovered or relocated. So during all of this, we actually had a field day and training planned, and that was on August 18th. And that had been planned for a few months. And the purpose of this was to test out all of our tracking gear and our eradication gear, knowing that our nest eradication happened much later in the year in 2020. We thought it would be a good idea just to make sure everybody using the equipment got a chance to test it out and make sure that it was all still functioning. And this was conducted on August 18th at Birch Bay State Park, which was an excellent host for this event. Because our neighboring state, Oregon, also is at pretty high risk for establishment of Asian giant hornet. Some representatives from the Oregon Department of Agriculture joined us for this training, and they were actually able to stay overnight and assist us in the field to get more intensive training the next day, which was August 19th. After multiple visits to and from a paper wasp nest, one of the hornets that we had tagged just kept appearing and reappearing on our radio receiver devices. And we were able to team up with not just the USDA, but also the Oregon Department of Agriculture, and eventually follow it back to the nest, which was eyes were laid on it by one of the members of the Oregon Department of Agriculture. So we can't thank them enough. In all of this, I have to say that the folks who originally reported seeing hornets allowed us very unfettered access, and we really can't get our jobs done unless people are that helpful to us. And eventually, when we did track down the nest to the landowner, they were also way more than accommodating in helping us do what we needed to do to then eradicate the nest. So moving on to the nest removal, I will say this nest was a little more aggressive than the nest we encountered in 2020. Could be a number of reasons for this, but in general, they were more interested in what we were doing, whereas the nest in 2020, they barely paid us any mind. We were able to do the eradication the morning of the 25th, which was yesterday, and we used the same procedure of vacuum extraction. It had to be modified slightly. The nest was not located high up in the tree this time. It was at the base of a rotten alder tree. And actually, it wasn't even a tree anymore. It was a snag. It was a tree that had snapped off in a storm a few years back and was in pretty advanced stage of decomposition. And the hornets had started making a nest right at the base of the tree, and in fact, were excavating portions of the tree to make the cavity larger when it was discovered. Upon starting our vacuuming, unfortunately, because the tree was so rotted away, the hornets were able to exploit this and create a second opening and did come out. Our safety gear worked very well in this instance. A few of us who were working very tight in the area were approached by the Hornets, and they did actually attempt to sting us this time. But we're all very happy to say that our Hornet suits worked very well and no injuries were sustained. We responded to this by blocking off the second entrance, and which stopped them from coming out, and then using an insect net to net those that had escaped out of the air. And basically, we were able to complete our extraction just within a few hours. The nest itself was examined at the Bellingham Extension Office in a controlled environment, and the nest had 9 combs, which is a few more than the one from last year. In those combs, we found 292 eggs, 422 larvae, 563 cap cells. So these are hornets that were about to be produced. 195 workers were either vacuumed or netted out of the air during the extraction, and no males were collected as any part of this, and 1 queen, totaling 1,473 individual life stages. To contrast that with the nest that we eradicated in October of 2020, that one had approximately 500 life stages. So this one was almost 3 times the size, and this early in the year. So we are all very thankful that the property owners and were able to let us get in there and handle it right away. And for the original report from the landowners who reported the first sighting. And we continue to ask people just whenever you see them, go ahead and report it. It really does help the cause, and it does allow us to get in there and do our jobs very quickly. So thank you very much. And Carla, was there anything I failed to mention?
Just one point of clarification, that the team that actually detected the nest was an ODA USDA team. So USDA was there as well on that, with one person being the eyes and one person operating the radio tracker.
Yes, thank you, USDA and ODA. Very, very happy to have your assistance that day.
Great. So we will now take questions, but first, a couple of reminders. If you do have a question, please use the raise your hand function, and I will call on you and unmute your line at that time. You can also ask a question using the chat function, and we will go through those. And we have a couple of people that help me in case I miss any, because they come fast and furious sometimes. And then finally, don't forget that we do have representatives from USDA APHIS, ODA, and I did see Paul from BC log on, so they are happy to take questions as well. So we're now accepting questions. You can either raise your hand or put them in the chat. Okay, first question from Don Jenkins. Were the paper wasps slaughtered? That was a tongue twister for me.
Yeah, okay, so we have this story that comes from one of the landowners that is one of the neighboring property owners. They definitely had Asian giant hornets visiting. In fact, I think we were even trying to net some from the paper wasp nest there. And this was a little after we had left for the day. They called back to say that an entire group of hornets then attacked one of the larger paper wasp nests, and the behavior they exhibited was they were simply grabbing all of the paper wasps and chopping their heads off, dropping them to the ground, and then harvesting, from that paper wasp nest. So this is what is actually described as the slaughter phase behavior that, obviously we are worried about with our honeybee population. So, I mean, I guess I would have to say, yes, that was slaughter behavior. This is not what we experienced throughout the rest of the neighborhood, where we were seeing individual hornets go up and harvest from other paper wasp nests, and not really paying too much mind to the paper wasps that were still there occupying it. So yeah, that's kind of where we were with it.
And John Ryan asks, can Paul or someone tell us a bit more about what happened to the Hornet that crossed the border into BC? And before I do that, I just want to clarify, we don't know that it crossed into BC. That was just kind of the last direction we had detected it. But Paul, this might be a good opportunity for you to give an update too about what you've been doing on your side of the border. I know you've been busy.
Well, thank you. Yes, well, we spent, based on the coordinates that were shared by Sven and Chris last week, we have spent an awful lot of crawling through bramble bushes and very rough terrain just straight north of the suspected area where the tagged Hornet had crossed the border. Apart from we searched far and wide and everywhere, but no Hornets were found. That's one thing. And we will continue to do this also in close cooperation with the residents that are there. We have been visiting them and contacted them, showed them what these things look like. And there is quite a bit of support and interest in this. Furthermore, our bottle traps are going to be changed from a juice-based material to attract them to a meat diet, if you will. We will have lures that will contain nice fish, cat food, in the hope that if there are any of these Asian giant hornets available, that they will be attracted to it, and in that case we can monitor whether they are actually in our area or not.
Thanks, Paul. Nicole Jennings, go ahead and ask your question. Nicole, we cannot hear you. You appear to be unmuted, but we can't hear you. Okay, maybe send your question in the chat, please, because we can't seem to hear you. There was a question. We are also live streaming this not only on TVW, but on YouTube Live. And there was a question on YouTube asking if the genetics had been tested and if it's related to the nest from last year.
We have not had a chance to test the genetics yet. This all happened very quickly over the course of 2 weeks, but there are plans to do that. We have several specimens, and we'll be definitely seeing how related this is to last year's nest and other nests that have been discovered, such as the one in BC.
Thanks, Sven. And there was also a question on YouTube whether it will be recorded. Yes, it should be. This should be immediately available on our YouTube channel at the completion of the press conference this morning. Question from Jake, actually. Any indication why this hive is 3 times larger than last year's hive?
No idea, other than to say that the habitat here must be very suited to strong development. And maybe the weather was just a little more favorable for them this year.
Question from Joe Tian. Does the fact that they're targeting paper wasps and other insects mean they may be less of an overall threat to honeybees?
I don't think that they are less of an overall threat to honeybees. Obviously, we did have the one homeowner say they were preying upon single honeybees that were visiting sunflowers, and obviously her identification was backed up with a photograph. I would not want to just rule that out because they're eating something else that's there. Eventually, that food source will wane, and they are going to have to switch to something else. So I'm in a way, I'm kind of glad they're going after the species they're going after because it is also introduced. But we have to take all of this for what it is, that they are definitely a threat to at least other social hymenoptera that are in the area. We were able to see paper wasp nests on folks' houses, but we don't know what else they're doing in areas that we weren't called to. So jury's still out, but based on the fact that we had attacks on honeybees in 2019 and again in 2020, we're still not ruling this out as being a pretty severe risk to the apiary industry.
Nicole submitted her question and asked, how many other nests are believed to be in the area?
Data right now from our trapping program and from the reports we have in do not suggest additional nests, but that's why it's so important for the public to keep submitting those reports. And we'll keep hanging our traps out. We don't know how effective we are, but we do know that they catch them. So last year, I could tell you that we had probably 3 more nests because of our trap captures and our public reports. This year, we've had 1 positive public report, and that's all.
Bellamy, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead. I'm unmuting your line. I think you have to unmute on your side too, but you can ask your question.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Sven and Paul, what does the future hold regarding these hornets? As far as you can tell, is the government quest to eradicate them something that we should expect every summer for years and years to come? How long will this take, or when could you realistically get rid of them?
Well, kind of a couple of answers to give you to that. For regulatory purposes, I need to see 3 years of negative survey data and 3 years of no reports before we would claim it to be eradicated. And that has to do with some procedures and protocols that go along with regulating the movement of goods and services and other things like that. But biologically speaking, there are large portions of land that have completely suitable habitat that we just can't get to, and that we can't even rely on the public to call them in because they are just so remote and so overgrown. And, it could be that there will be a number of years before we could ever really declare it 100% confidently eradicated. But, practically speaking, we've done quite a bit of outreach. We had quite a presence at the county fair up there, and got a lot of visitation to the stand. We had some great members of the public also helping out at that fair, spreading the word. People got to see the nest from last year, and it was very well received by all. So as long as people keep this on their mind, keep looking out for it and report it, we do stand a good chance still. I'm very pleased we only have 1 nest to this point and 1 report to this point, that's not associated with the first report. So, that's what we're shooting for is, within, the next 5 years or so, we're really hoping to make sure we're not having press conferences about this.
Yeah, and so that the fact that the nest is close to the other one is a good sign, right?
It is. I am very glad that we don't have hits down in Custer and Birch Bay yet this year. We had those areas covered pretty well because we had some reports last year that they just never went anywhere. We got no additional fines, and our traps turned up nothing else in those 2 areas. But the year previous, we had a Custer report, and last year we had a report in Custer. And that, for those who don't know, that's a little south of Blaine and a little to the west of where we were operating today or yesterday. So, it is encouraging, yes.
Mm-hmm. And which county fair were you referring to?
The county fair in Whatcom County.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Just for clarification, that was the Northwest Washington Fair, and it was in Linden, which is in Whatcom County. But just for a little more detail there, Sven was not wrong. I was just providing some additional detail. John Jenkins was asking, any theories on why the Hornets were more aggressive this year?
Well, my number 1 theory is when we found the nest last year and when we eradicated the nest last year, it was very cold out. It's quite a bit warmer this year when we located the nest, and it was quite a bit warmer when we eradicated the nest. And most insects are not quite as active below 50 degrees as they are above 50 degrees in general. And I can assure you that it was quite a bit warmer this time when we were working on the nest and when we found it. So that is my number one theory. And unfortunately, like I said, they were able to exploit a weakness in the dead snag and create a second exit. So last year they didn't have anywhere else to go but into a vacuum.
Nicole asked, you mentioned on Twitter that there were some suspicious stings in humans recently. Can you describe what made them suspicious? And just to clarify for you, Sven, someone had asked if we'd had stings, and I responded that we had some suspicious stings that we could not confirm.
Correct. So we did have at least 2 that were reported to us that really had all the hallmarks of being Asian giant hornet, but we are not medical doctors. The individuals were not able to collect a specimen that had to deal with these stings, but the aftermath, they were kind enough to share photos, and basically their physical reaction to them are consistent with what appears in the literature and with testimony from folks who have been stung, like Conrad Berube and a few of my friends in Japan. And this just means, you know, intense pain, overwhelming swelling. And in one instance, the report last year, the person was kind of out of commission for a few days after this sting. And that's not really typical from most of the things we see here. But again, it's nothing that can be confirmed because there are other things that sting, and different people react to these other stinging insects in different ways. So it's entirely possible that they were stung by native things, but they are suspicious because they meet all the hallmarks of an Asian giant hornet sting, but nothing confirmed at all.
Thanks. John Ryan asks, is there any indication how this species reacts to warmer temperatures or heat waves, as our region has seen this past summer?
Nothing that I have read. You know, Paul maybe can step in and see if there's something that he has read. But certainly in their native range, they're exposed to all different types of temperatures and seem to come through it just fine. What I can tell you is, as of August last year, we had already had several reports, and this year we hadn't had any reports up until the one on August 11th. And so we're dealing with one report versus several last year, and honestly, I'm not sure if the temperature has anything to do with it or not.
If I may add something to this, the only thing is that much of the success of any nest is contingent upon the availability of food. And if food is in abundance, then obviously this particular nest was very successful in accessing this throughout the season so far. It has had a chance to grow larger than perhaps the other one that was caught last year. Climate change is much more of a long-term projection that can eventually perhaps facilitate in the greater spread of this particular pest, but that cannot be measured just by a couple of seasons or so. It's mostly food availability that determines success.
And just to kind of comment on that, we had seen several paper wasp nests, like Sven mentioned. We saw a couple that were basically dead and no longer had any paper wasp, but there were plenty that still did. So definitely plenty of food sources there. Joe Tien asks, while you continue eradication, are there increased efforts at ports, et cetera, to keep them from being continually introduced?
I would throw this over to my APHIS counterparts if anyone's willing to speak on that.
Sure, thanks, Sven. So APHIS works very closely with Customs and Border Protection, and the agriculture specialists over Customs and Border Protection are very aware of the Asian giant hornet and the work that we're doing on the Asian giant hornet response. This season, we actually had one of the agriculture specialists find an Asian giant hornet dead on a ship deck. So not a concern because it was dead and quite degraded, but they are aware and working to keep an eye out for any signs of Asian giant hornet in imported shipments.
Thanks, Anne. And I believe that is all the questions that I see. I don't see any hands raised either. And so I did want to give both USDA and ODA, if you'd like, if there's any other comments or statements that you would like to share, we would love to give you that opportunity. And maybe while they're doing that, if there are any last questions that might come in, please get those in so we can be sure to answer them. Anne, do you have anything further?
Sure. I just wanted to say, thank you to all of the citizen scientists that have helped to trap for the Asian giant hornet in Washington, and to everyone who's reported seeing an Asian giant hornet through WSDA's reporting. If you are outside of Washington and think you see an Asian giant hornet, you can go to the Aphis website and take a look at the Asian giant hornet page. We have a lookalike section that can help you to determine if you're seeing an Asian giant hornet or something that might be similar. And just again to say that we have a really wonderful team working on this with both our partners that are doing research to support the eradication, WSDA, and everyone else in the federal government who is also supporting this. So thanks, Carla.
Thank you, Anne. And Jake, did you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, thank you again to WSDA, Sven, and Carla for inviting us up. It was an excellent training. It's good to know the technology before and if we have to use it again. And hopefully it stays in Washington and we can help eradicate it with y'all. Right now, there are no current Asian giant hornets in Oregon that we know of. If you do see any, please take a photo or send in any reports online to oda.fyi/Hornet report. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. And so, Anne, there was a follow-up question about the Hornet detection on the ship. There were a few here. Where was the ship from? What was the cargo? Was anyone stung? Oh, sorry, that was a different question. Excuse me. Do you have any further detail about the ship detection?
So the ship itself would have gone to a number of ports on its way here, and the Hornet was found on the deck of the ship, so it was not associated with any specific cargo. So probably, the Hornet flew onto the ship and died there. And that specimen is on its way to the Smithsonian's collection. So sorry, I don't have any more specifics on that.
That's okay. Thank you. Let me go back here. We had a sudden flurry of questions come in when I said that. This was the end. There was a question, was there anyone stung in eradicating the nest?
No, very happy to report that we sustained no injuries and no one was stung. There were attempts by the ones who escaped through the extra hole to try to come at both Dr. Chris Looney and Cassie Chehorse and myself, but they just bounced right off of our lovely suits, and no injuries sustained at all. So we're very happy to report that no one was stung.
Another question, can the Hornets' attraction to paper wasps be exploited this year in finding more Hornets?
Excellent question. I sort of alluded to this right at the very beginning, but yes, Dr. Jackie Serrano with Aphis is working basically with some live Hornets from this extraction in a very controlled setting. And our main goal is to see if we can get a better attractant that is based on the smell or whatever it is that's attracting them to paper wasp nests that are, hidden inside of pipes and places where you wouldn't necessarily know they are. Obviously, we're going to exploit that to the fullest extent. These are not things that happen overnight, unfortunately, and we have a very low population here still, relatively speaking. One nest last year, one nest this year that we're aware of. So we will probably have to use partners in, say, Japan or Korea to test any of these things that happen in an area where there are quite a few around naturally. But yes, there are plans to try to exploit that. It may find a silver bullet attractant for us. It may go nowhere. But that's science for you.
Clarification, Dr. Jackie Serrano is with USDA's Agriculture Research Service, not with my agency, the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. We do have researchers that work for APHIS that are also working on attractants, but Jackie Serrano's lab with ARS is in Wapato, Washington, and she was able to do some testing with live hornets from last year's nest, which was very helpful. And I think, Sven, you guys have some experimental traps that she's come up with for this year to try out.
Absolutely. Nothing in them yet, but they are up and we've been trying.
Thanks, Carla.
Thank you, and thanks for that clarification. There was a question about whether either of the people that found the nest are on the call. I do not see them on the call, but if you look at not our most recent press release, but the one from last week when we had found the nest, there is contact information for both USDA and ODA, and they may be able to put you in contact with the people that were working on that team if you'd like to talk with them. Another question, are all of the hornets, larvae, pupae from the nest dead now, or will they be kept alive for research?
A subset will be kept alive, basically to do the experimental testing we were just discussing. Those are in a very controlled setting in Wapato, and we are confident in that because none of those are breeding hornets, but we do need them to see if they will react to certain compounds. And that is Jackie Serrano's lab will be doing that. We provided those to her late yesterday, and hopefully she can make some headway on her research with that. The rest of the nest, of course, will be destroyed. We do not like to keep live life stages around, especially those that are pupae or larvae at this point, because we're not too late in the season, but it is possible that any of the newer ones could be breeding past, and so we're obviously not going to take any risk there whatsoever.
All right, another question. What are the sting-proof suits made of? How thick are they? They look like thick neoprene.
So it's a very soft foam inside, covered by a white mesh netting to contain it. And the principle here is that the 6mm stingers, which is about a 1/4 inch, if you will, the foam is actually thicker than the stinger of the hornet. So even if they did sting us, the stinger would not penetrate and be able to hit your skin. And so they can get a little warm on the inside, but in general, they are kind of light. What I will say is they are fairly uncomfortable, but it's got to be more comfortable than being stung. So we're always happy to make that trade-off. But yes, they're a very thick but light foam. And the principle behind it is that it's thicker than the length of the stinger.
Thanks, Ben. And another follow-up question, and on that detection, they were wondering when that Asian giant hornet was found and which port it was detected in, and which agency found it.
It was found by Customs and Border Protection agriculture specialist doing an inspection on a vessel. And I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, but I believe it was San Francisco.
Thanks, Anne. That's all that we have in the chat here. However, I noticed that we do have quite a few questions on YouTube Live. So I'm going to pull some questions from there. Ask your patience, as it's a little bit challenging going back and forth here on my laptop. There was a question about what is the lifespan of a worker?
A few weeks, and that's actually a pretty important question because with any nest, there's usually a few that kind of don't make it back to the nest at night. And even after we had completed our extraction, there were still a few returning. And this could lead to folks in the neighborhood, as these spend the next couple of weeks of their life just kind of dying out, to see hornets still foraging in the area. And so it was actually kind of important for us to know that we can expect them only to live for a few weeks more.
One queen was found. Was there any signs of a queen produced or that they made queen cells?
I don't have any information. We've not taken the time to actually measure the cells. We did that with last year's nest and found that some of the larger cells definitely had capped queens in them, or we believe queens had emerged from. We have not made that analysis. We did get some counts in for you, but I'll speak with Chris and see if that happened, and we'll probably put an update on what, Facebook, Carla, or
Yeah, we may do a blog if there's enough information, but we'll get it out there one way or another.
yeah, don't have it yet. Sorry, but it's forthcoming.
Okay, just scan through these questions really quickly. Question about how far can hornets travel from their nest?
The actual total distance is unknown, but what we do have is we have average foraging distances. Most hornets operate within 1 kilometer of their nest. 2 kilometers is not unheard of. Most activity will take place between 1 and 2 kilometers. But we also know that the maximum forage distance that appears in the literature is 8 kilometers, which is about 5 miles. It's like Paul's.
If I may add something to this, please consider the fact that foraging behavior is quite distinctly different from mating behavior. And that is why it is so incredibly valuable that this nest was found now, before the sexual stages got into full swing later in the fall season. And the reason is that when a nest eventually disperses the sexually maturing offspring, they can fly much greater distances. We have done years ago experiments then with honeybees. Of course, they're much smaller, but yet we were astounded by the distance that these insects can fly if it is for the purpose of mating. And there is probably nothing different with the Asian giant hornets. The distances can be very large if it is strictly for the purposes of mating rather than for foraging behavior. So that is why it is so critical that these nests are found as soon as possible rather than later in the season.
Thanks so much, Paul. There's a question about what is the annual budget for each state for Asian giant hornet eradication? I don't know, Sven, if you have our numbers off the top of your head, but that's all that we could speak to.
Well, I know our budget is between outreach and the actual eradication and trapping is roughly $650,000. I believe Ann could speak to what other states are receiving.
Thanks, Sven. I know that Oregon had put in a suggestion through one of our funding opportunities to do some trapping for Asian giant hornet. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but perhaps the Oregon Department of Agriculture has that. The APHIS has provided more than $1.1 million for the eradication outreach and research efforts this fiscal year.
I am pulling up the information right now on what we received. I know ours is a bundled survey, as USDA does not support only Asian giant hornet standalone surveys. We do not have any state funds currently for Asian giant hornet in Oregon.
While Jake looks that up, just to clarify, the funding source that Jake is talking about is our Goal 1S survey in what we call the Plant Protection Section 7722 funding source. And in that goal area, we have a list of priority pests that we are funding. And so funding can be provided for other pests that are of interest to the state. And so in this case, Oregon was interested in trapping for Asian giant hornet. Since Asian giant hornet has not been detected in Oregon, there isn't specific funding for a response.
And then the Oregon funding, we do receive $78,000 on a bundled survey, but part of that only goes to about 30 traps for Asian giant hornet, and the rest of that's going to different exotic wood-boring bark beetles and oak pests in that bundled survey.
Thanks, all. I'm impressed with you pulling up those numbers on the fly like that. I don't think I prepped anybody saying get your numbers in line. Oh, I'm sorry, Paul. Was somebody else saying something?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Okay, my apologies. Some more questions from YouTube. Did you redesign the trackers or adapt them since the first find? And I'm not sure if they mean this year's find or I'm guessing they mean last year's find.
It's a slightly different tracker, and by that I mean it's produced by a different company, but essentially it's almost the same exact thing. They're at a slightly different frequency, and we're using different receivers than we used last year. I wouldn't say that they're better or worse in any way, other than the receivers we're using are, about 1/4 the weight to carry around as you're trying to slog through blackberries and other heavy brush. So from that perspective, it's basically the same product, but from a different company. Nothing too different to what we were doing, other than we were using Kevlar thread. And I think the other procedural thing we did is we are chilling them as little as possible. So we would prefer to net one off of a paper wasp nest, chill it down for about 10 minutes, tag it and release it, rather than keep it overnight and tag it and release it. That is, unfortunately, we're a victim of circumstance there. If we get a call and we have to come from 4 hours away, we're probably doing it the next morning. But if we're already on site, like we were for 2 of the 3 tagging events, then we're able to use fresh hornets that are caught right then and there. And I think the only other difference is the hotel was offering mixed berry jelly instead of strawberry jelly. So this year we ended up using mixed berry jelly to feed them, to make them happy. And Dr. Looney had actually harvested a paper wasp nest with pupae in it for the last one. And she jumped right all over that after she woke up from her ice bath. So we did attempt to give them paper wasp pupae instead of jelly as well. And they seemed very interested in that. But honestly, don't read too much in it. It was only one test of 1 hornet at this point.
Thanks. There is a question about whether anyone's joining us to film the eradication hunts. They said it would be good documentary material. And not this year. We are doing some of our own filming, but you are in luck. There is already a documentary, as last year Discovery happened to be with us from the time we caught our first live hornet last year through the nest eradication last year. You can look it up on Discovery Plus, I believe. It's called Attack of the Murder Hornets. So there is already that documentary, as well as TVW did a short documentary called Nest Zero, and I think there might be a couple of other small documentaries out there. But the Attack of the Murder Hornets is definitely the longest one. All right, sorry, I heard somebody there, but I will go through a couple more questions here on Facebook. Hold on 1 second. I think somebody's unmuted, that I'm going to go and mute. Just one moment, please. Thanks for your patience. There were less queens found in this nest as opposed to the one last year. Does that have to do with the time of season?
Yes, I would say it absolutely does. The nest last year was found in late October, and that is the point in the year where they are producing breeding cast, if you will, and getting ready to disperse for overwintering. This time of year, they're really just building the nest up to enter that, fall stage where they're then going to switch over to making breeding casts. So that is why there was only the one queen. They just hadn't started the reproductive cast yet.
Another YouTube question: do Asian giant hornets only nest in the ground, or do they nest under eaves or like paper wasps?
In the literature, there are 3 recorded nests, I believe, just 3 that are inside of human structures, and those would be in the void spaces of human structures. Those are the only 3 that I remember reading about. Most of the literature says that Asian giant hornet prefers to nest in the ground, usually at the base of rotting pine trees. Here in Washington, 100% of them have been in dead or dying alder trees. Actually, this particular one was right at the base of an extremely rotted alder tree. I believe 2 of the combs were right, I would say right at ground level, if you will. The rest of it, they had started to work up into the extremely soft wood of the rotting alder tree. And then, of course, last year's was 8 foot up inside of a pre-existing void in an alder tree. That tree actually had quite a bit more stability to it. It wasn't quite as far gone. But that's what we have experienced here. But we are still told reliably to expect them in abandoned rodent burrows at the bases of rotting pine trees.
If I may add something to this, I mean, basically, this particular species of wasp or hornet, as well as one of its sister species, Vespa soror, are typically what we call cavity nesters, and they prefer soil. But if there is the danger of flooding, they certainly don't hesitate to go higher up and away from the soil. But by and large, they set them a little bit apart from your traditional yellow jacket or bald-faced hornet, the native ones that are out here, which build these massive paper-shaped, basketball-shaped nests underneath the eaves of houses or whatever. So it's just, they are cavity builders, and that's I think a key thing to remember.
Another question: are there any specialized trainings provided to agricultural business owners to help them have a more defensible means of preparedness in case AGH attacks their farm or bees? Before Sven responds, I'll just mention we do have on our YouTube channel and website an actual training for employers that have people who may be encountering Asian giant hornet. That includes not only farm workers or farmers, but people that are in forestry or maybe trimming roadsides near trees, etc. So that's one thing that we have. I don't know if Sven's aware of other.
I don't believe we have anything quite as specific as what was mentioned in the beginning of the question there. And I have to admit, we probably need to have it repeated to remember those specifics at this point. But certainly we do have a very active outreach coordinator, and I'm sure we can talk to her about working that into the things that she does in the course of her duties.
If I may add something to this here in British Columbia, we essentially advise against people that are unfamiliar with the behavior of Hymenopterans to get engaged into the eradication or the control of these very formidable hornets. I mean, the Asian giant hornet is the largest hornet in the world and can cause some very serious damage to a person who is not familiar with their behavior. Or we really advise and strongly advise people to say, look, if you have reason to believe that there is a nest somewhere, contact the authorities, and we are equipped. We have equipment and we have familiarity with bee behavior, wasp behavior, and hornet behavior, and go through the steps of eradication. I would be very hesitant to recommend any Tom, Dick, and Harry to start getting involved in this, simply because they can cause so much personal damage to a person. And panic, because these things are so large that definitely you have to suppress your basic instincts of panic. They are quite formidable. So.
Thanks, Paul. Another question about whether we resolved the glue issue from last year, or how are we tracking the hornets?
Oh, yeah, we resolved the glue issue from last year by just not really using it anymore. We are tying the radio tags to the bottom of the Hornet, and that seems to work out a lot better. Last year we were using dental floss. They seem to be able to chew through that. We have switched to Kevlar thread. The last Hornet, the one that led us back to the nest, didn't even seem phased by having it tied to her, and continued to revisit the same paper wasp nest she was raiding again and again. And I guess we even recaptured the Hornet later after the discovery of the nest, and were able to recover the tag and deactivate it, and may even still get to use it again. So yes, I would say the glue issue is resolved.
By not using it.
I also wanted to mention, we do have a picture of that Hornet in flight with the tag on it more than 24 hours after it was initially tagged, and that's available on our press release from last week, and that wire is pretty bent up. I think somebody is unmuted again. Might be Paul. All right, there's a question on YouTube. What is the quote unquote season of Asian giant hornets?
Okay. We kind of try to play it safe. We start the bulk of our searching activities, and by that I mean trapping and really pushing out education to the public to call in reports around July 1st. And that's when you're really going to, start to see additional workers start to appear in the nests and things, which would give you the great chance to encounter them. But the life cycle basically goes, they overwinter as a mated or unmated queen. They wake up maybe as early as March, but probably more likely towards the end of April and into May. The queen starts producing her own nest and producing more workers to help her. As those workers start to emerge, they start to take over other duties, and the nest starts to grow in size. After that portion, when the nest starts to become large again, they start foraging basically for the sole purpose of creating a mating cast, which starts to show up around in, we think here in North America, probably as early as late September, but certainly through October and into November. And honestly, the first Asian giant hornet reported here in the United States was actually one that had died on somebody's doorstep on December the 8th of 2019. So we know the adults are maybe still even active as late as December. But that would be the season. We would say the season to do something about it is July through November.
Thanks, Sven, and thanks everyone for participating. There are a few more questions in the YouTube live chat, but we're rapidly approaching the end of our hour here. I would encourage people that are still interested, if you haven't already, we do have a Facebook group called the Asian Giant Hornet Watch. There's a lot of people that have been following this for as long as we've had the group up, which is about 1.5 years now, and it can answer your questions right away, even if it may take me a while to get back to them. So that's a great resource to go to if you have questions, as well as our website, which again, you can not only get information there, but report suspected sightings at agr.wa.gov/gov. And I would like to thank the public once again. I mean, you really are making the difference in our ability to detect and the Asian giant hornet in the first place, and then find these nests. So those public reports continue to be super important. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.